Welcome to the episode where we talk about Stoner by John Williams. No, not that kind of stoner. No, not that kind of John Williams. And no, not that kind of book club. Of course, we're not just any book club.
All right. You said
I've had months to think about that joke.
that's true. That's true. We were gonna do Stoner several months ago, and we went on hiatus for I don't know, life reasons, college. And yeah, Stoner. Do you have anything to say about John Williams in particular? I know you tend to do research about the author before we start, Justin.
Well, this author hasn't particularly been a well-known author, right? He kind of faded into obscurity. He wrote a book, Stoner itself, just obscure. No one really knows about it. And up until a recent, it was well-known in literary circles until kind of faded away, and then around in the 2010s or 2000s, when it was being translated to French, got popular again.
Yep. And so I would say also after reading also Butcher's Crossing by him fairly recently, it appears that like some of his books are more well known in certain circles. So like Butcher's Crossing specifically is a Western, and so people who like Westerns had been reading that book still. Maybe not the most popular one, but it based on the introduction, it appeared that it was like well respected, at least in that circle. So like he's written stuff that's been read and talked about, but definitely not like if you just ask like a random person on the street, they'll probably be like, who's John Williams? They'll tell you he like did the music for Star Wars or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been well received, even among our inner circle. You, me, and then there's this guy right here that has a very differing opinion.
In the end, I gave it still a positive review.
I'm mildly positive, not a glowing review like me, Justin, your host, and Pierce, the co-host, and Luke.
Semi-recurring member.
Yeah, Luke the recurring member.
When he feels like it.
When he feels like it. / when he can. Sometimes, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess what I would say, having read another one of John Williams's books, something that I really enjoy about his style in general, and I'm sure we'll get into that in Stoner, is that he brings a lot of not excitement, but he makes the meandering and the ordinary very interesting to me. I think he makes it. I mean, you normally wouldn't want to read a book about a guy going through just kind of being a professor, or you wouldn't normally want to read a book about just like some people walking through the Great Plains to try and get to the Rockies. But somehow he writes these books in such a way that still makes them good reads and interesting. Yeah.
What I really like about John Williams, having read this book twice, I just really like the prose. It doesn't use very just gratuitous vocabulary that tries to flex on these big words. It uses these very long sentences, and but they're not exceedingly long. They're just very elegant, and it's very classy, is the way I like to say it. It's not even dated at all. It's just a very well written book. Um, yeah, that's all I like to say about John Williams. And he's very character driven. He likes to give characters depth, where you not even expect it. There's no true villain. Even the people that we tend not to like happen to have some just like characteristics that you can kind of see from their perspective or what made them that way, but they're not at fault. Well, they're at fault, but they have their reasons, I guess. Yeah.
All right. I guess we should get into Stoner specifically. Um, broad strokes, plot,
Broad
something
strokes.
that we're
We'll
gonna
do it.
try and do more often on this show. So William Stoner is our main character. That's where the title comes from. It has nothing to do with the drug
Does this
user.
poke the doobie?
No. So he's a farm boy, and somebody comes from the local University of Missouri to convince his parents to send him there, pay for him to attend and study agriculture, and there's some back and forth. But he goes and he starts studying agriculture, and then in an English seminar, he finds out he loves literature. He loves the English language. And so he decides he's going to switch his major and he studies there. Um, and eventually he tells his parents, and that's a big deal, which we might bring
Yeah,
up.
because
Um,
like all
and
English majors, it's like, what do I do now?
um, and so he gets involved in academia, and he pursues advanced degrees and becomes a professor at the University of Missouri. And I mean, that's basically the rest of the book, to be honest, if we're doing broad strokes. He gets married to this woman who doesn't really even seem to want to get married at all. And
Just
she's
wants to get out of that
rude.
house.
She, if I had to guess, she might have like, she might be bipolar somewhat.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and they have a daughter together. So he kind of lives a somewhat normal life there, but obviously there's some problems with it. And then in his work life, he starts teaching classes. Um, he slowly works his way up the ladder, and then he comes into conflict with the then new head of the English department, or yeah, or was he the head of the
Something
English
like that.
department? And he wanted to like go up.
He wanted to stay a
Um,
professor, but Walker, I think it was like
Yes,
the head of the
Walker
English department.
Walker wanted to. Yeah, he wanted to
No, no,
stay
Lomax.
Professor Walker Lomax. All right. Yes. So Lomax, Hollis Lomax, he is a colleague who's going to. He's gonna become the head of the English department. That's what it is, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so they kind of come into conflict over a specific student who is pursuing his master's, and they both are on a panel to decide if the student is um, ready, is of the right stuff to
yeah.
pursue a master's at this university. And
He chokes.
yeah, basically, Stoner sees this kid for what he is. That he doesn't really know some of this stuff with a lot of depth, the depth that he should. Um,
Yeah,
and Lomax disagrees. That's at least the way that I
because
saw it, but we're in Stoner's
the,
perspective. But
yeah.
go ahead.
Mhm.
Well, there's a big reason why Lomax kind of vouches for Walker is because
Yes.
they both are disabled.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he Lomax kind of cheats for him by kind of giving him the answers during the the
The
confrontation during
discussion.
the
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
panel defending
Right.
his thesis.
Yes. So yeah. So they get into this huge conflict about that, and then Lomax becomes head of the English department, and Lomax pushes him down and down and down. Um, and again, broad strokes. We're gonna jump to something. Towards as he's getting older, Stoner seems to decide like he doesn't care anymore about the fact that he's being pushed down and down and down by Lomax, and he uh, just basically teaches this freshman class the like seminar that he would have normally been teaching at where he was at in his career before that confrontation. Um, and this eventually leads to him making it back into the classes that he was originally teaching. Um,
He won.
yeah, he wins in the end, and he gets to teach what he wants. And then spoilers, a book about a man's entire life ends with him dying, which we will get, I'm sure, have a huge discussion about, because it is an incredibly important part of the book that I think gives it a lot of the meaning it has, and I think it's a lot of the reason why it connects with so many people. That this like final chapter, um, I'm sure, and I skipped over a lot, but I'm sure we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
His family life, the conflict with Lomax, and again the final chapter where he is
Yeah.
sick and
It
dies.
kind of just gave you that very long first paragraph of the book
Yes.
into just paragraph into podcast form. Yeah,
um. Yeah.
but
Does anyone
I
have
love
any
the book.
preference for where we jump? You love the book.
Yeah, I love the first paragraph especially. So we could start.
Mm.
Oh,
It was I.
do you have some?
It was okay.
Okay.
But I will agree with Pierce before we start is that the author really makes the mundane interesting in the way he writes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we both described this episode as a bit of a cage match because it's 2-on-1 right now.
Hmm.
Luke right here is the sole. I mean, he doesn't hate the book, but he's just kind of ho hum about it. But
Well, I see the
well,
book in what I think is a fairly different way from Pierce and Justin, and I think most readers. Right? To me, this book reads as a straight up tragedy
hmm,
of a man who's been broken down, and then at one point he just gives up. And this, like, last third of the book for me is a man who's gone through grief and hit it all up, and he's in resignation or acceptance. And I don't buy it. I don't buy the peace he feels at the end with his life. I don't believe it. I think he's
he's just
deluded
coping.
himself too much by the end of the
Okay.
book. So that's where
Okay.
I stand at, and I think is in fair opposition to both Pierce and Justin on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So yeah.
was. It's definitely an opposition to
Yeah.
both of us. Um,
Half
I
glass
mean,
empty kind of guy right there.
I guess we could just jump in at the deep end at his death and kind of work backwards from that as to like the things that he might regret or
Benjamin
have
Button
come to
style.
peace with. Yeah. Um. So I mean, even you agree though that it definitely seems is written as if he's kind of come to peace
Yes.
with his life and his
Hmm.
situation.
Hmm.
Okay. Um. All right. Well, yeah, so I guess I'll describe it for the listeners. He's on his deathbed and um he feels himself dying and he doesn't call for anyone. He thinks back on his life and there's like a worry, there's like a tension almost within himself it seems. And then he thinks a little more about it and he kind of lets that go and he appears to again come to peace with it. And I think it's a really sweet moment because it appears to me like Justin, I'll let you speak. I've been speaking for a while while I collect my words.
Well, so he's basically on his deathbed and he
Hmm.
is at peace. I also really love the line, "So this is what it's like," because he basically has been very indifferent towards death this entire book. Once he gets his cancer diagnosis, he just kinda shrugs his shoulders and is like, I don't need treatment. I'm dying? Oh, well." Which I really like. Yeah, so basically he does not go gently into that good night. He thinks about his past. Grace visits. I think that's a very important part of this book. Grace visits, and basically, because Grace was kind of the anchor point in his domestic life. It was the one thing that kind of held him together, even though he didn't get much time with her because Edith, Edith just wanted to take her away from him as an act of war, of domestic war, for no good reason really. Um, but Grace visits, kind of an alcoholic in a way, and tells it straight to Stoner. Um, I guess mom and I were disappointments to you, but he assures them both that, or really assures her that they were not. He lived a hard life, but he didn't prefer it any other way. Which I don't know if he came to that conclusion later on or just like at that moment, but I think it's just him looking back on his life and going, I had a good life. And then he and Ada sit together. They silently make up for everything because they make some small talk, and they're not bickering for once in their life. They are just at peace. And this is when Stoner's about to die. So I'm guessing Edith is just finally takes some compassion. I think this is the one quiet moment they've ever had together that they were nice to each other. Um, and even Finch visits, and he says, "Well, you lied to me. Your doctor tells me that you're dying of cancer." Oh well. Well, all right, buddy. Okay. And it's not very sentimental. He just kinda just waves it off because Stoner's not a sentimental guy, as you're saying.
Yeah. Not I've collected myself. So I'll go ahead with what I was trying to say and kind of the meaning that I take from the book, which is we talk about how good John Williams is at making the mundane interesting. And to me, him coming to peace with his life, um, that last like the latter half, even probably the last third of the book, I think kind of gives it its whole meaning in my eyes,
Mm,
which is that the ordinary is important and even fulfilling if you spent your life choosing passion, even if that
mm.
passion leads you to have such an ordinary um,
Even below
an
average,
ordinary
kind of.
life, even below average, an ordinary life as a professor. Um, and the reason I say that last half or even the last third of the book is because that's where he's really choosing passion. He gets into a loveless marriage with Edith towards the very beginning of the book, and then they have a daughter together, and he has moments with the daughter that I would say are passionate moments for a father. Like he shares things with her and he takes care of her. And it sucks that that's all foisted upon him because Edith is not tends to not be a very good mother. But he does his best and he does a lot of and he from what I remember when I was reading it, it felt like he felt a pride in his daughter as she was growing up
Yeah.
before Edith tried to tear them apart. Um, and then later he chooses passion in the affair. He has an affair later that we haven't mentioned yet. Um, and even though that ends, it ends on pretty good terms. His wife finds out about it, and she's like, you know, whatever you have to do. Kind of, she takes it really well, actually. Um, and but their affair ends really well. It's with a student, and you know that could
Graduate student.
get him graduate student that can get him into some trouble, but he does it anyway because he has there's a passion for this romance that buds between them, and then it ends because she has a career to take care of after she graduates and you can tell even as he finds out some of the successes she's had, that he still feels like again like a pride or a passion for her and what she's gone on to do, a love there, and then again something that we have mentioned, getting away from his personal life into his work life, he kind of he pushes for what he's passionate about in his school life as well. He pushes to get back into the classes where he can teach the things in the like English department that he's most passionate
Mhm.
about, and he wins and he gets it back. And I remember, been a while since I've read it now because because we pushed this episode off,
Whoops. Sorry.
but but from what I remember, there's a it's the beginning of one of the chapters. It's talking about how he's kind of become like this like the older man in the department, and he's like kind of talkative but crotchety in the like department meetings and stuff. And he's really like pushing for the things that he's passionate about, regardless of what the other people think of him
Mhm.
um, in the department.
It's all yeah.
And I think that all of these choices, the first half of the book is yes, very tragic. He sets up his life in a way that is not ideal. He's setting himself up for a lot of sadness and awful things to come, especially his decision to get married to Edith. I would say that's the biggest thing. But through the choices he makes in the second half of the book, he makes the most of all of it. Um, he chooses to live a life that I would
Mhm.
say by the end on your deathbed, even though you made a lot of wrong choices, you can still live with those because you've also made choices for passion, and you
Mhm.
can live with those bad things for that, and the ordinary life you've lived your entire life because you've done the things that you're passionate about and that you're actually happy with.
Yeah. I will even say that, one important thing that, you may not have mentioned is that when they're having a farewell ceremony for him, like, when he's retiring or something like that,
Yeah, I think yeah, when he's
yeah,
retiring.
he has a speech, and it's, like, built up to be, like, because it's all about him and he's about to say this goodbye speech. He's about to do it, and then he gives a very generic speak and stops himself from saying, "If I wasn't teaching, I would." He doesn't even finish it. He just says, "Thank you all," and says goodbye. So he doesn't really care about the recognition. And I think even at the end of the book, he talks about him writing a book that's about grammar and syntax or something very mundane. Um, he knows that it won't be recognized by people, but in that book, it was him. So he's very passionate about that. Um, and even then, a character
That's
that
the
we have
moment.
not mentioned,
Sorry, that's the moment
uh,
where he's like
like,
holding the book
yeah,
that's his, and he's like cherishing
it's
it.
mine.
Yeah,
It's mine.
right.
Um, and then there's that scene with Arthur Finch, right? His friend who's, head of the English department, not the whatever he's below Lomax. Um, he's kinda like the mediator between
Thought he
Lomax.
was technically above Lomax.
Yeah, by the point that
Oh,
Lomax comes into the book, he's like gone up, but he
Yeah.
was
oh,
below
yeah,
the
yeah,
original English department head at the beginning
yeah,
of the book. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's one it's his one true friend. He's always been supportive of him. He relishes in his joy, and whenever Stoner fails, he actually feels compassion for him. And Stoner does have the opportunity to pass Walker and let this all slide by, but Stoner stands his ground, and even quotes Dave Masters again, because that quote keeps on reappearing. He just goes, "No, I'm going to stand my ground, and whatever happens, happens. We cannot let Walker pass because he's
Have
so
we
passionate about it."
have we said the master's quote yet in the
We
actual
have not.
podcast? Yeah, maybe we should say that quote.
Where is it? I mean, I wrote it down. I just want to double check if that was the right quote, but yeah, it disappears every time. So Dave Masters is one of the first students that he meets at his time in the University of Missouri. Him and Arthur Finch, and Dave Masters gets enlisted to World War One, and he is killed almost immediately. But the impact that he's made keeps on reoccurring through him. It keeps occurring to Stoner at multiple times of his life, and it's just and a bit of pride. And Arthur Finch, when World War One happens, he gets sent to a teacher's camp and then goes back to college. So basically, to commemorate him, they always bring up this quote. Um, and let's see, where's this quote? All right, I have it. I'm just gonna read off what I wrote. So David Masters says just about they're BSing. They're talking about life and they're talking about what their philosophy of life is, and here they talk about life and they talk about the university specifically. And David Masters says it's an asylum, or what do they call it now? A rest home for the infirm, the aged, the discontent, and the otherwise incompetent. Look at the three of us. We are the university. The stranger would not know that we have so much in common, but we know. don't we? We know well." And he looks at Stoner and he goes, "Who are you? A simple son of the soil," as you pretend to yourself. "Oh no, you too are among the infirm. You are the dreamer, the madman in a madder world. Our own Midwestern Don Quixote without his Sancho, gamboling under the blue sky. You're bright enough, brighter anyhow than our mutual friend, but you have the taint, the old infirmity. You think there's something here to find. Well, in the world, you'd learn soon enough. You too are cut out for failure. Not that you'd fight the world, you let it chew you up and spit you out, and you'd lie there wondering what was wrong. Because you'd always expect the world to be something it wasn't, something it had no wish to be. The weevil in the cotton, the worm in the beanstalk, the borer in the corn. You couldn't face them and you couldn't fight them because you're too weak and you're too strong and you have no place in the world. When I first read that, I kind of highlighted that as that was a little bit pretentious. But then, as they kept on repeating it, I'm like, "Oh, it's a metaphor for Stoner and how he's strong and weak at the same time, strong for sticking true to his ideals, but weak for not fighting back. But in the end, it's his heart that kind of wins, I guess, in a way."
Yeah, and he does end up fighting back in all of the facets of his life. He lets Edith chew him up and spit him out. He lets the university system chew him up and spit him out, and then he has an affair with on eat over has an affair over Edith. I don't know how to phrase that exactly, but he has an affair, and he fights back in the university system, and um, he reconnects with his daughter eventually after allowing Edith to drive them apart. Um,
Mhm.
he does a lot, and I think that's kind of part of it. That was what was striking to me as you were reading it. That like that is him for a lot of the book, and then towards the end, he breaks from that,
Mhm.
a- and he actually takes charge of his life somewhat. Anyways, Luke,
Oh,
what
yeah,
what
yeah.
do you
Why
what say
why is this
you?
depressing?
Yeah.
Well, I would start by saying, hearing everyone talk, it probably would have been better structurally if we started at the beginning instead of the death.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
well,
was
first
thinking
I want to talk about Finch for a second because while I do agree, Finch is the only living friend that my boy
that is
Stoner's
mentioned.
got. You know, was he a good friend? Was he a
He
solid
does
friend?
he supports him all the way through.
Supports him
He
all the
does as
way
much as he
through,
can.
but he also
Oh,
has a deep understanding of who Stoner is as a person. He also listened to Dave Masters do his little pretentious speech, right?
hey, they're
And
grad
he
students.
was dead ass right about it. But you know, Finch isn't afraid to use Masters, right? He put Finch in that seminar with the dude, right? Knowing what Stoner would say, using Stoner to avoid um, any friction between him and Lomac,
I
right?
yeah.
So while he is his friend, right, and while he has supported him throughout his life, he hasn't been afraid to use Stoner's, if not naivety, his conviction and his passion for knowledge and learning, and specifically in this literature stuff, to help
Mm.
himself when he can too. Right. So I don't think he's the solid friend that
Well,
make him out to be.
He's by no means a perfect friend, and you also I do definitely get the sense in the conversations he has with Stoner that he's not necessarily he does end up looking out for Stoner, but in a lot of the conversations they're having, he's like prodding and trying to figure out what he's going to do.
Mhm.
Um so I don't think he's like a perfect friend, but I would still call them friends, and
Oh, for sure.
I would say that um, it appears to me that there, even though he's probably going to look out for himself like he did the situation with the grad student. Um, I do. It still appears to me like they have a genuine connection,
They do.
and that Finch looks out for him. Not he's. I think I can't remember exactly which conversation it was, but there was a conversation that struck me when I was reading it, where it appeared like Finch was looking for any reason to help Stoner, um,
Hmm.
towards the end. Um, it was one of the conversations they had about the situation with Lomax,
Yeah.
where he was trying to figure out a way that he could help Stoner without like hurting his position, and he
Hmm.
was sitting there trying to have Stoner help him come up with that way that they could help each other out like that,
Hmm.
because he did genuinely care about Stoner and what happened to him.
All true. I agree with Pierce 100%.
Okay. The goal of this podcast is to get Luke to really love this book. So we don't allow dissenting opinions here.
It ain't working
uh,
so far.
we definitely tolerate them, because I don't think we've ever changed your opinion on Hemingway. So
Okay. 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 So since we started the end,
uh,
just real we're not gonna do chapter by chapter, but yeah, we could try to go a little bit more in depth, and because like there are some foils that I
we've
want to talk about
definitely
and all that.
right. We brought up a lot of the situations. I think now we could
Yeah.
probably work back and go in more depth if anyone wants to.
Well, the one thing I do want to talk about is the home life both Stoner and Edith had growing up.
Mm.
Right.
Oh,
Vastly different and shaped who they are as adults, for sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Just
Stoner
like
worked at a
how.
farm. Yeah,
What's
you
up?
want to describe it? You want to describe it or?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, it's been a minute. But Stoner, right, grew up on the farm in Missouri, and his parents were weird in the antisocial kind of way. Right. I remember specifically mentioning the fact
Yeah.
that as they were growing up, their parents barely spoke to one another.
Yeah.
Barely spoke to other people. Stoner growing up barely spoke at all, taken after his parents. But we see that the parents still at least like each other enough to stay together. They're a solid, functioning family unit within themselves in their weird kind of way, right? And
Mhm.
it's sort of an opposite. Edith's family growing up, much more financially successful initially,
Mhm.
much more social and outgoing, kind of a different class or different caste,
Right.
back in the day. But there was a lot of dysfunction there, specifically with the dad, right? Edith has got to be one of the OG daddy issue characters
Okay.
Yeah.
to go down in history. The mom too, in her own way, they were very dysfunctional growing up. And you kind of see that as a bit of a clash of perspectives as they're raising their kid, Grace, right? Stoner clearly is like his parents, but we see a shift, kind of how Justin or Pierce was talking about earlier in the second half of the book, where Stoner tries to take charge of himself a little bit. And he diverges from what his parents did with him. He pays a bit more attention to the girl, Grace. And then we also see Grace trying to diverge from her, the way she was set up. She had the daughter. She sees a young version of herself, and she wants the young version of herself in Grace to do everything that she felt that she couldn't do as growing up. And
Mhm.
so we see that bit. We see how that develops into a antagonizing role with Stoner as she sees her
Mhm.
dad in Stoner somewhat, whether it's actually deserved or not, and tries
Mhm.
to take it out on him using the child, and it totally fucks up the kid. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that bit on because that's a fairly large amount of the book when kind of like the main setup of the book is Stoner's self journey, right? And there's all this other stuff going on around that.
I guess we're an explicit podcast now.
Did I curse?
It's fine. It's fine. I do think that that's obviously a huge portion of the book, and I think like I don't know that he's necessarily going the opposite of what his parents did,
Yeah,
Stoner.
for sure.
He has her around, and he's kind of sharing with her his interests. If I remember, she sits in his office while he's working, and she'll like read or color or whatever, draw. I don't know if it would be coloring at this time yet. But he's like involving her, and they're working together. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the opposite, but she seems to be developing well under him, which I think is huge. Like she seems to be coming into her own, I would say. And she seems very intelligent. She seems like she would do well to kind of follow more in her dad's footsteps, regardless of what she decides to do at college, to attend a college. And then her mom comes in, and I would say like the reason why I want to specify that he's not completely opposite to his parents is because he's not really. I think it's the main difference between the way that he's parenting Grace and how she seems to be turning out versus when Edith comes in and divides them, and then she starts parenting Grace more and how she gets messed up in the future. That he is, yeah, she's in the room and he's kind of sharing with her and helping to develop her interests, but it's her interests, it seems to be. And with Edith, Edith wants her to wear dresses. She like berates her about what she's doing, the way that she's dressing, what she wants to do. And she's trying to turn her into this girl's girl that Edith was when she was younger and wants her daughter to be, and that really messes her up. It is definitely a huge part of their life, and it's really a shame. I would say the probably one of the biggest tragedies of the book, because I do think genuinely he comes to peace with his life. The biggest tragedy of the book is Grace, that Stoner didn't step up and start acting sooner, because her life, the way that her life turns out, obviously is not. It's going to be a lot harder for her to come back from that than Stoner had. How easy, not easy, but his time of coming back for it was just standing up for himself more, and her time of coming back for it is going to be raising this kid with her dead husband's family. Like it's a lot. It's a stickier situation, not to mention the dependency on alcohol and all of that she has to deal with now after being messed up by her mother.
And also important to mention is that Grace kind of rushed into that. She basically got pregnant almost on purpose just to be able to move out or something. I don't remember the exact reason, but I think at the end, Stoner kind of looks at her with a sort of sordid pride, because she drinks, but like she also quietly accepts her life, kind of like Stoner. It's not the best ending for her, but like
Yeah.
it's like she's not gonna complain or something.
I
And considering
Go
you
ahead.
could
No, go ahead.
okay, yeah, considering the time period here, um, there's not much upward mobility. The glass ceiling is basically the floor.
Yeah. I was just gonna finalize it by basically saying like I don't think Stoner is this grand tragic figure. Obviously, that's where we differ. But Grace almost certainly is. Her life is going to be tough going forward from where we see her towards the end of the book.
I
Collateral
don't
damage.
I don't think she takes care of her kid by the end of the book. I thought the dead husband's parents took, if not
There's that
custody,
too.
ended
I
up
thought
raising him most of the time.
yes, but didn't she also move out there with them to? I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. You might be right, but if I remember correctly, she moved out there, so she could technically probably take more charge and maybe. I mean, actually, that's a good point. Maybe John Williams left that in there specifically for a way that she could take charge of her own life, like her dad does. Um, so that's possible.
Possible.
But 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 yes, yeah, I think you might actually be right that for the most part, the kid is being raised by the dad's parents by the end.
Yeah. Um, that's like, the small glimmer of hope there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one character that, I mean, he's not entirely relevant that I feel like is worth mentioning. Archer Sloan. Um, he's there. He kind of tells. He's basically Stoner before there was Stoner. He kind of tells him, "Hey, at this time is university. He's only in like the first third of the book. I think he's only in for 3 chapters. Um, Archer Sloan just tells him, "Hey, you should get into teaching. You're really good at this." And basically he's just like, "Sure, fine." Stoner says, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And Archer Sloan keeps on working himself to death. He just keeps on working. He doesn't have much of a life outside of his own work, and I think he's kind of a foil to Stoner in a way because Archer Sloan is completely dedicated to his job. So dedicated that he died in his office, and really no one finds him until like the workday after the weekend, and he dies of a heart attack. And Stoner really thinks that yeah, that's how he wanted to die. And I think the contrast between him and Sloan is that um, it's kind of left ambiguous if that's how Sloan wanted to die. And I think Stoner's the only one at a funeral, or really the only one showing compassion. Like he's actually crying at the funeral. So um, that could be just a mirror as to like what Stoner is like to the outside world, or really one person really cares, not really anyone else. Another interesting thing that I think John Williams does this really well. He does a lot of foils, or really contrasting events. Um, it was Stoner's parents and Ada's parents, and the way that they pass away. Stoner's parents, or the Stoner family, their parents, they worked hard and they died essentially where they lived. They never moved away. They died of a heat stroke. No, his father, Stoner's father dies first, right? Um,
Hmm.
he overworked himself on the farm, and then his mother refuses to visit him. He just tells him, "Hey, come over here." And this is way after Stoner just basically is well acquainted in the life of Missouri and its time in university. But really, he finds himself going back to the farm. He's almost kind of pitying them. He said, I think the narrator goes like, "Yeah, the world that they lived in really dulled their intelligence. They didn't really do much, and they died without leaving much of a mark in the world." That is in contrast with Adolf's parents, who were very affluent. Um, and really, Ada's father takes the quote unquote cowardly way out. He sees that that the stock market's about to crash because it's about to enter the Great Depression, and Ada's father is all jovial, but he goes in the office and shoots himself. He dies by suicide, but it turns out to be pointless because the family was fine. A little bit. They took a little bit of a hit. Um, and then Edith just says that his mother does not want to live with them anyway, so they don't really care about any of that. Um, so I kind of find that interesting as to how um, these two they kind of mirror Stoner in a way. Stoner and Edith, how basically Edith's family kind of takes the cowardly way out. They're so used to this pristine life that they have. Well, Stoner is just used to the hardened life that he works through, I guess. Just found that interesting.
Yeah. Think um we've gone in depth on quite a bit. One thing that I do want to also mention
We didn't mention the affair.
is yeah, I was going to mention that I kind of view it almost as the turning point for Stoner. He is before before that point, he is kind of going through the motions. Edith has basically taken his daughter away from him. Um, he has become depressed and is um he's not seeing his daughter. He's working late. He can't find joy in his work anymore.
Mhm.
And then he meets Catherine, the grad student who he ends up having an affair with, and they love each other. They have a beautiful relationship. Again, I don't know if either of you have any insight on this, but I just thought it was funny that Edith seemed to take it so well when she found out. And of
It was
course
an
she was
open
able to
secret, yeah.
yeah, and of course she was able to tell because this relationship brought him so much joy. It's such a great bright spot in what was before that a tragedy of a life up to this point.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the biggest thing is when it ends, it's not it kind of gives him a bright spot, and I think it really kind of gives him um if he never meets Catherine, I don't think that he has the gumption to do a lot of the things that he does later in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, also, this is, like, probably the only romance I've ever cared for in a book that I've read so far, because I was like, "Yo, I want these people to get together so bad." Because like, again, it is the one bright spot in his very dismal life that has just been, tragedy after tragedy and, after getting screwed over by Lomax here, by giving him a schedule he doesn't want and basically dooming him forever to have this uncomfortable schedule to be teaching stuff that he doesn't want to teach. Boom, Catherine comes in. And I think the way that Catherine comes in is also very adorable because basically, Catherine is very awkward around him and he gives Stoner this thesis, and Stoner just kind of begrudgingly reads it, and he's like, "Whatever, I'll read it." And then, when he says that Catherine's gonna meet up with him again, Stoner gets so distracted by reading her thesis, it's just like, "Yo, this is great, this is amazing." And Catherine gets so fed up that she leaves, and then they have this little, open affair where it just goes to the apartment over and over again. And I'm like, "Yo, they got it, they got together." Once they start admitting it to each other. It's a wonderful story. Yeah, like, I love the prose here. I mean, Luke, did you like this part?
The pros of the affair.
The affair.
Just the part with the affair in
Yeah.
general, I
No,
think.
I was a big fan of that.
Okay.
Big fan of the
You do
affair.
have a heart.
A big affair fan over
A
here.
huge affair fan. No, is the girl's name Catherine or Kathleen?
uh,
Cat
I can't
I,
remember.
Catherine
Kathy.
is written down in these
My note.
notes here.
I'll believe that.
It's Cath. Okay,
Kathy.
Katherine.
Yeah,
So
it's Catherine.
yeah,
Okay, Catherine. No,
Yeah.
I thought it was fine. I mean, I don't really. From the moment it happened, I didn't see it ending any other way than the way it did.
You didn't think they're gonna run off into the sunset?
No way. No way.
yeah, I didn't think so either. There's I mean, from it kind of you kind of preempted to know how it ends because
Mhm.
Sloan specifically tells him like the university does not typically give jobs to their grad students. We want to teach people and then send them out, send our like brightest to other universities to go teach there. This is not a typical thing, but he gives him an opportunity to continue his um, he's pursuing a doctorate, right?
Yeah.
And teach at the university. And so kind of from the beginning because she's on almost a similar track to what he's on. It
Mhm.
you kind of know that eventually she's gonna leave. And he is so attached to his job at the university, he's not gonna follow her. Not to mention the
Yeah.
fact that he has a daughter who, though he's not seeing, he still loves.
Yeah,
Um,
and you can't really get a divorce because 1,
mhm,
Edith's gonna fight back, and 2, divorces around this time, not very common and not very encouraged.
yeah. So you are kind of preempted with like this is she's gonna leave eventually, and he won't. He won't do it. But for the little moment that it's there, I think that it is a beautiful if temporary thing, and it is it also, again, I think it's hugely important because it gives him the confidence and the gumption to do something about the rest of his life going forward.
Yeah. Um, it was a very wonderful moment. Yeah, and it also leaks into his work life as well because he teaches very well. Because his teaching ability kinda ebbs and flows 'cause, he starts off very awkward, and then once Grace comes into the picture, he's elated, he can teach again, and then once Grace gets removed from the picture, he becomes a really bad teacher, and then once Catherine comes in, he becomes the best teacher in the world. Just goes up and down like a roller coaster.
Yeah, this is kind of a side note, not a very in-depth thing, but I remember at the beginning of the book they said that he was like a like unremarkable teacher basically. Like his students didn't really have much of an opinion on him, but it doesn't seem to be the way that it's described in the book itself. He's either
Yeah.
like really awkward and bad or like actually like a really good engaging teacher. And like you said, it ebbs and flows, but he's rarely like unremarkable as a
Mhm.
teacher.
Plot hole. Yeah, yeah, I'm trying to justify because damn, that is a pretty good point, and I'm like, "Hmm."
It's not
Whoever
a
wrote that
hugely
epigraph.
it's not a hugely important thing, but it was something that I noticed because the I mean even that sentence is I think really good where they talk about how he's like unremarkable as a teacher. So it kind of stuck in my mind, and then going forward I was like it's not really true. It's
Yeah.
Um, I have a feeling like most of his life was just like him being a mid teacher, C your C tier English teacher that you just kinda don't pay attention to. Plus he teaches freshman seminar.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess it's also that we get like specific this we get the specific points when things are different. That's also possible because it's a pretty short book for his entire life, so it does do a bit of
Yeah,
skipping.
it is a few yeah, it's fewer pages than the Hunger Games, so, I mean, there's no excuse why your 14-year-old cousin can't read this book.
Yeah, it's probably as easy, if not only slightly harder to read than the Hunger Games, too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a diss or not.
Well,
Like
listen, if I was 14 and I read the Hunger Games, which I think I read when I was like 13 or 14, or
yeah, same here.
Stoner, I would have picked Hunger Games all day, personally.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really appreciate Stoner as a 14-year-old. As much as I would love 14-year-olds to read this book,
Hmm.
and books of similar amount of
Quality.
importance and quality, I don't know if you can really appreciate it until you're a little bit older.
Well, I
That
mean,
is fair.
I'd even go to ask, could we appreciate it in our early to mid 20s? You
It's
know, what if
true.
we read this again when we're 40? You know, I think
And then it'd be
I think it'll be a bit different for us.
yeah, then we hate it, and then you're the one that loves it.
um,
All along.
yeah,
Oh,
I don't
well
know. Does
oh,
anyone else have any specific moments or things they want to
no,
talk about?
I was gonna say that the way that this romance ends, it was really sad because basically the way that, Stoner says to her is like, it's not, like, they could have continued the relationship, but they would basically be struggling to survive, and that would have killed the relationship. So they didn't want to lose Grace. He says to her almost verbatim, "It's not about Grace or Edith or even about losing love, but it's about preserving their love and having it not break down." and then they do the nasty right after saying that. They do the nasty a lot.
They do. That's like one of the primary things about having an affair, I think. So that that would make sense. um, I guess you could have an emotional affair and never do that, but
Your work wife.
but no, it's a full affair. They
Yeah,
do they do have sex quite a bit, quite a lot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all right.
Um, maybe, we can also talk about the time that he finally gets the cancer diagnosis, and I think this is like him going, "Yeah, I don't care." Um, he just kinda shrugs his shoulders because he just doesn't care. Um, I think everyone's kind of begging him to get a cancer diagnosis or something like that, and he just doesn't care. And I think that's what he wins after, even after his victory against Lomax. He doesn't even take it as a pride thing, taking it to gloat because, they haven't spoken to each other directly. Even at his retirement party, they just don't speak to each other, which is I think the closest they do get to each other is either in that office scene with Finch, but basically they kinda use Finch as a proxy. I know they're sitting right next to each other, and they're talking to Finch, and then Finch talks to Lomax, and then Lomax talks to Finch, and then talks to Stoner. And the one time Lomax gives a speech at his retirement ceremony, other than that, he never takes pride in anything, he never takes an opportunity to gloat. It's just him being respectful and courteous, kinda, like, basically take swallowing his pride and just working, and doesn't expect anything in return. Oh, and also, he doesn't care about the campus politics. Again, going into the thing about his pride, and his passions, he doesn't really care. He doesn't even know the university president's name. He doesn't even shake hands with anyone at the ceremony. It's just a bunch of platitudes, and
That
he goes,
is that is uh completely and totally based as a teacher of any kind to
It
just
was.
not get involved at all in like the administration politics. I don't want to do that. I want to teach and just leave me alone and let me teach.
"What a
Just
guy."
yeah,
Yeah, and, the cult of John Stoner still lives on. Oh, well, William Stoner. My god, I got his
John Stoner. John.
yeah. Yeah,
Any
John Willie
other
Stoner.
John
Willie
William
Stoner.
Stoner? Um, I mean, I don't have any other big moments I'd like to
I don't
go
have the
over.
big moments. Um, I know I'm being so scattershot, but that moment when he had the book and it was Catherine Driscoll's book, the book that she promised to publish, and he basically receives it in the mail, and he
Oh
sees
yeah,
2, uh, 2 WS. I'm like, and he starts touching the book, and he starts crying. I'm like, "No! Oh!" That's the life he could have had. He could have had that life, but he didn't. But he
Basically
appreciates
lost the
it
kid
happening,
anyway.
existing.
yeah. In a way, it's again. I think the most tragic thing is what him not stepping up does to his kid and the relationship that he has with her. Um, I everything else. I mean, I think I understand coming to terms with and being at peace with, but just I mean, like Justin said, like maybe the in a way he comes to peace with it and he has some pride over her for like taking her lot in life and not being like resentful, super resentful of her parents and
Mhm.
stuff. And but I don't really think that's probably the weakest part. I would be very upset if I had a kid and
Yeah,
I because
no,
I was too like
passive.
much of a pushover. I let my wife just mess her up. I wouldn't be able to come to terms with that at all.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm like, yeah, that still had to be the most devastating part of the book. It's probably in a fictional sense, it's probably more devastating, not more devastating, more solemn or sad to read
mhm.
than a child's death because it's just so prolonged, and it's just like, damn, they're having a worse life. And like you
Yeah.
could do something.
All right. Well, the thing that gets me about that whole setup, right, is that the two major catalyst, well, I guess the one major catalyst in John's or William Stoner's life, thank you,
You did it
Justin,
too.
is is his passion, is his passion, for knowledge, for specifically medieval literature. Why God that, but um, and love, right? Originally with Edith, that didn't pan out immediately. That was a terrible idea. And then with Catherine, right? Those are the things that get him to actually go do something, defy convention, really chase it. And the saddest bit is that he clearly didn't have a passion for being a father, for raising his kid enough, right? If he did, he would have done something like he did when he stole the money from his parents to go switch to literature, or why he would decided to have an affair and risk both his job initially and his marriage. And then when it came to the kid, he didn't have that passion. He just didn't, and that screwed over the kid, in my view.
Damn. But it's kind of lopsided because it's mainly 80% Edith and 20% Stoner.
I wanna defend him. You're right. I would say my one defense of him would be that again, I think that the affair kind of gave him a new lot in life, showed him that he can do things and, and be happier because of it. Um, and I really should reread this book.
Because,
I
like, what
reread
did
it
he do for
twice.
his kid post affair?
I remember, I think it was too late. I do remember there were a few times that he kind of stuck up for her in the situations where she was like trying to decide what she wanted to do. And when she was going out with all those people, he stuck up for her when Edith kind of took issue with some of the things, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I know what you're
Mhm.
talking about.
But I honestly at that point it might have been too late, which is the tragic thing that he needed to do something earlier. Um, and you're right that it might have been that he wasn't passionate enough. Otherwise, he would have acted earlier than that. But I still think that post affair, he was in a better position, and if mentally, and if she was a little younger, then he might have actually been able to adjust and keep her from going down the path she ended up going down.
We can debate this topic for the end of time. I don't know. Yeah, if I was in his shoes, I would like to say that I would have done more, but who knows? I'm not William Stoner.
That's the other thing. We get a really zoomed out perspective of this man's life,
Mhm.
and we can see things that like it honestly from the very first like couple of chapters where you meet Edith, I was like, this is not gonna go well. This is a terrible decision.
There was
Um,
very
Yeah, he
clearly
rushes
something
to
off
it.
about the girl.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you also have to think like from his perspective, he's enamored with her. He's and in real life even being enamored with someone, you do stupid things. Maybe not necessarily rush into marriage, but
Plenty of people
Well,
do
maybe
that.
if
some
maybe
people
if you're
do
Mormon.
that.
If you're
Yeah,
Mormon.
some people, and I mean some non-Mormon people do that. But like you got to think that even as we're seeing it and seeing that this is not going to end up well for him, that happens. It's realistic. That happens, and I believe back in this time, people got married quicker than they do now. So I'm sure it happened even more back then that people just jumped into marriages when they weren't really compatible because they were infatuated with each other. Not to say Edith was infatuated with him because I don't think she
Oh yeah,
was.
She
but
was not, bro.
but but he was, so he couldn't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the one thing, when Edith loses the domestic battle, it is almost satisfying just to see her just, like, kinda, like, once William Stoner just goes, "I don't care. I'm gonna stop listening." Edith Stoner just starts talking to herself. She she's she just walks around the house just doing nothing.
This
That was
this is our
satisfying.
this is our fundamental disagreement on the story.
Mm.
You're supporting her?
I
What?
say this is when Edith won. Yep. I say
Ha
that specific moment you're talking about is when he disassociates and then the full tragedy comes in, right? Edith won.
okay.
Doesn't mean she's happy in her victory, but she
Pyrrhic
won.
victory.
Yeah.
When was this? Sorry,
This
I'm not
was
remembering this
that
moment.
moment. I forget exactly what in the
Uh,
book later in the second half, where
Mm.
Stoner comes home one day and he has this epiphany, this metamorphosis that he just no longer is going to be bothered by Edith's um, whatever weird annoying shit Edith does to him anymore. He's just moved beyond that in his life. And it's a defined moment in the book. I forget exactly where though.
In Justin's notes, it says chapter 15.
Okay. Yeah, this is the moment where I like totally turned on the book where I was like, okay, this is a guy who's broken. This is the point where I say this man's broken, and then every bit after that is from a broken man who's trying to reconcile with himself.
I think that at this point it's almost too late, because I would agree with you if this was earlier in the book and this is what led to her having immense control over the rest of their daughter's life. But this, I mean, this is like the third to last chapter.
Mhm.
This is the chapter where Grace gets pregnant. Um, Now Edith is also able to persuade her to stay at home, which is another sign of her messing her daughter up, and maybe that comes into play there with what you were saying. But but I don't know. At this point, I think it's really too late for their daughter, which is the main thing that Stoner should be standing up to Edith about. Um, Grace is really, I would say, the main sticking point, and once she's gone, honestly, like, he could ignore her, he could divorce her. I don't think it really matters after that point. Would I rather see him have like a good relationship? Yeah, but I don't think I think after Grace it's kind of moot, because it's
Hmm.
they're getting older.
Yeah. No disagreements there, to be honest. Well, I think we've exhausted this book. I mean, I got nothing else to add. I think we've covered every nook and cranny in every single possible order we could have done. Um, any last thoughts?
No.
Oh, okay.
I Even if you end up not liking it as much as we did, like Luke, I think it's worth checking out. If not just for the way that John Williams writes. I think he writes to bring so much to
Mhm.
mundanity. I think is an achievement in
Yeah.
itself that's worth seeing for yourself.
Yeah. This book spans multiple decades, and it doesn't always feel like a period doesn't feel like a period piece at all, because, like, it's almost like, I don't wanna use the word world building, but basically all these historical events happen in the background. Prohibition happens, and it's mentioned very briefly, and it happens very organically. I just thought that was really interesting too. I think he's a very elegant writer. It's very economical, not a really wasted word, but it doesn't go into very absurd length where it's becomes like iceberg theory. We don't talk about that, but I like it.
Luke,
And
any closing words?
No, I think it's a worthwhile read if you're interested. It's easy. It's not super long. Justin told me that I could do it in an afternoon, and he lied to me. But I did manage to
Oh,
do it in 2 days.
okay.
You
An
could
entire
probably
lie.
you could probably do it in a day.
Yeah,
An afternoon is
Okay.
pushing it. I agree. But if you set aside a day, you could probably get through it.
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's worth reading. A lot of people seem to have enjoyed it more than me. Have found something in it that I haven't quite found. Uh,
Well,
no,
hey.
And that's
Yeah.
that's when we do part 2 to this episode in like 20 or 30 years. We all reread it.
And you know what? It would still be on r/TrueLit's top 10 books of the
Probably,
decade.
probably. Um, it's eloquent and lots of people seem to connect with it in one way or another. I think you have to be probably a little older than a teenager, but lots of people,
Lies.
lots of people seem to connect with it. So I think it's worth a shot there.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, I mean, there are
Yeah.
people who read Lord of the Rings in high school and thought it was the best thing they ever read in their lives. I am
Is
not
that
one of
you?
those people.
Okay. All right.
yeah, Lord of the Rings is great as the grandfather of fantasy, but I don't think
It's no
it's definitely not one of the
it's
best
no
things ever.
stoner.
No stoner for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Um, all right. I guess we should sign off. Man, it's been a while since we've done this. Um, if you enjoyed the episode, please give us a follow, a rating, subscribe, whatever it is on whatever platform. We appreciate all of that. Really helps us out. Um, you can also find us on social media at Not Just Any Pod on both X, Twitter, and TikTok. Um,
We're
and
active.
yes, we're active. We're trying to be more active on TikTok. We'll see. Um, and lastly, next month, we're gonna try and do a little more nonfiction this year. So next month is Cities of the World. I don't know if we're gonna do a. I should mention this also. Bookends is changing to on the books.
Off the books.
Off the books. I forgot the name. Off the books. The title is changing. I don't know if we'll do one of those episodes for this month. We might look
Or
into it and see if there's
it'll
anything
just
that
be something completely
makes
random,
sense.
unrelated to it. Possibly.
Could be. That's true. See if there's anything we want to do, or if there's anything that makes sense. Maybe it's Oscar season. Maybe we'll do an off the books on that possibly. We'll talk about
Ooh.
it. We'll talk about it. But next month is Cities of the World, where we're going to be reading nonfiction on a city or area, small area of our choosing. All right, and
Yeah,
I think that's
and
about it.
that is about it.
Bada
And
bing.
goodbye, Prometheus.